Hello everyone, welcome in. This is section 2.3, draw the essence of a character, their face, and Chyan's Coloso class, drawing and coloring anime style characters. So welcome in guys, it's been a little bit. I've been getting ready to get my schedule try and nailed down as classes start, and I include better habits for my homework and drawing, and showing better physical examples for you guys on my socials, which you can see them around here, as well as my portfolio work and the work that I show in this document here. On a side note as well, Coloso has also released some classes of mediums that I'm interested in or styles that I'm interested in that I want to include in my portfolio work and my skill set. That's just not necessarily directly correlated with the work that I want to be directly doing when I step out into the commercial side of art. While these do interest me, these aren't necessarily a focus now, but let me know if any of these classes interest you guys down in the comments or on my socials as well. I'm more than happy to take a look and see who's interested, and see if it's worthwhile to post reviews for you guys that are interested, if there's going to be an audience that would appreciate that kind of content. So back to today's lecture review. 2.3 was honestly a very interesting and a very engaging course to follow along with. There's a lot of really good notes here, as well as some really good examples that Chyan shows during the lectures. So if you guys have the course, I would definitely recommend following along with it for some examples, because these are all just some basic notes and visual references that I took during the class that don't do anything close to justice. So getting started into the notes here. The two most important things when working on a face is that you must show sophisticated expressions, which mainly are going to come from experience and your accuracy of drawing what you intend to, as well as to either make it pretty or make it handsome, which Chyan mentions is a commercial essential in order to draw more aesthetic characters for commercial purposes. Practice the head shape to apply perspectives and then get an accurate face, which Chyan's approach mainly covers a cuboid with a chin drawings, which are going to include mainly these, where you have the cube and you've got a little chin area there, and we're mainly going to be drawing these in perspective in order to draw more accurate faces and expressions. And then the cuboid chin is half the length of the cuboid, and the center lines are drawn center to the cuboid. So obviously you draw your cube, all the lines are center and square, and then the length of the chin area is the same length of half of this cuboid. So you can see these lines are exactly the same length, or they should be. These lines are not measured by any means. Chyan kind of goes over the proportions of the face in order to more accurately draw them within the cuboid shape as mentioned. So the middle line is eye level, the line that follows to the back lines with the top of the ear. So this line right here, and you can see in this sort of perspective, it follows along the center part of the line and then actually touches the top of the ear there. And these eyes should actually be a little bit up or the ear a little bit down, but whatever. The ear is slightly forwards from the center on a side view. However, given proportions, we're just going to assume it is center in order for simplification process. So in this, you can tell it's a little bit offset from the center and pulled closer towards the face. But for the sake of simplicity, Chyan pretty much states it's safe to assume it's center, just to make sure it looks right. And then the nose is the bottom line of the cuboid that we draw that actually starts into the chin section. The mouth is slightly above the middle between the bottom of the cuboid line and the bottom of the chin line. And the front profile shouldn't generally be drawn with the generic cross section because it oversimplifies the impression of the face. So I'll show some examples here of my own drawings where I do this. It helps for showing the general direction and the sort of perspective you kind of want to take. But Chyan mentions that it oversimplifies and it makes it more difficult to draw a face that has expression and perspective. So that's why he takes this cuboid with the chin approach rather than the circle with the cross section. As for the eyes bulge inwards compared to eyebrows, so when applying perspective or orientation of the face, make sure the eyebrows are placed correctly. As you can see in this example, the eyebrows are actually set a little bit to the left rather than directly above the eyes, and that's because, as you can see here, the eyebrow actually lifts a little bit up and the eye is a socket, so it goes inwards. And so because of that, when we're at an angle, this eyebrow is actually going to sit a little bit off center from the eye when we're seeing it from a perspective. So these are important things to know if you want to draw more nuanced expressions and perspective. And then the eyelid is made of 3 general lines with a stylistic 4th, 5th, and a 6th and 7th around the eyelid that express the eyeball shape. So this is mainly what I mean by this statement. The 1, 2, and 3 are the general bases you're going to draw for your eye, no matter the style that you're in. And then these, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7, as well as the 8, are all going to be stylistic, depending on how more realistic you want your style to be. And then you've got 9 and 10, which are the inner crease of the eye here. 11, which implies the lower lashes, the part of the skin below the eye where the lower lashes stick. And then 12, which is going to be mainly bags, or what's implied by the rest of the bulge on the left side of the eye socket. This isn't generally drawn except for more expressions based on the character. And most of these lines generally aren't drawn. 4 is generally excluded in casual style or anime style, as well as 4, 8, and sometimes 7 and 6. So mainly the top ones that you're going to need are 1, 2, 3, and 5. And then double eyelids are generally drawn, and above is the limit line between the double eyelid and the eyebrow that is generally not drawn. So what I mean by that is that this line right here is going to be your implied double eyelid that occurs because your skin folds above your eye socket. And this line here is actually going to move above and below depending on how this eye is raised, because this line is implying skin. So as this eye opens up more and more, this line is actually going to move upwards, and that's going to imply the limit line, or really it's going to define the maximum shape of the eye as the double eyelid moves. And then the lower part of the eye, a line can be drawn around the corner of the shape where lower eyelashes stick from. This is what I mentioned is going to be line 11 there at the bottom right. Supplemental curves can be drawn under the eye, but generally aren't. Again, those are the bags that are drawn and are generally used for more expressions rather than a stylistic choice. And then playing with angle and which lines to change increases style and impression. This is sort of what was gone over by that statement in the class. So the sharp lines can generally indicate different expressions versus gentle lines, which are going to include more slopes and more rounded edges and lines. There's some more examples down there at the bottom, but in general, this is what is meant by that statement. Just play around with the lines and expressions, and this is where you start getting more expressionistic eyes. So some common eye expression cases, the sharp impression, which is going to be a half open eye with a double eyelid spread over it as a result. So you can see this is more for like a seductive gaze or a more sharp looking character in general. And then you've got your gentle impression, which, like mentioned prior, is the rounding of the shape of the eye to give a less sharp impression. And then your masculine to frown, which is an upward / curved bottom of the line of the eye. So you can see this masculine eye has a little bit of a sharp look with a bit more aggression. And as you can see, as this bottom line starts rounding out and the eyebrow starts getting a little bit closer to the eye, you get closer to a look of disgust. And some general tips on eyes. A downward slope of the eyes generally implies more gentleness, as described in the gentle impression. Pushing the lower curve up has a sharper impression, as mentioned in the frown. The shape of the pupil goes inwards, which is important to note when you're trying to draw an accurate gaze, where both eyes will perceive a cross. So this is kind of what I mean by this. As you can see, directionally speaking, the pupils will both aim that way because the pupils move inwards to the eye and not on the surface of the eye. So it's important to note that if you have them on the surface like this, you kind of end up with a more cross-eyed looking character as you try to draw a gaze, because you can see that the gaze, the pupils cast is the points don't meet at all, versus this one where the points meet and you can see that there's what would imply to be an object here. And then some tips for the nose and mouth. The nose is often the most omitted part of casual style or anime style, and the closer the nose and mouth are to the eyes, the cuter the impression, and the style of the nose will determine the impression of the character. So as you can see with this example here, the younger expression will generally have the nose style drawn closer to the eyes, versus a more mature look will draw the nose style further away from the eyes. So you can see these are generally nose types. You've got like your upward slant of the nose, which is this one, or the bottom part of the nose implied, which is this one. You've also got a triangle that you can sort of shade, which I generally include right there. And then you've got your 1 or 2 nostril styles as well. As for the mouth, for female characters, it's generally based on the inner part of the eye between both eyes, and that range is going to be where the size of the mouth fits. For male characters, it's going to be between the center of both eyes, and generally push it a little bit inwards from there. So what's meant by that is that your mouth range is going to be from these eye centers here for male characters, and the inner parts of the eyes right there for female characters. And then to draw more H characters, draw more loose mouths with less style applied, and the inverse for younger characters. So this is what's really meant by that, and these are more stylistic choices as well, just to note. As you can see, this is a very stylistic and simple mouth, so this is going to be really good for more childish characters, versus as you start adding more detail to the mouth, you're going to have a bit more of a mature look or a more realistic style to your mouths in general. So you can see this very plainly in Sui Ishida's work. If you see how he draws mouths with more unsettling characters and teeth with unsettling characters, you can kind of understand how adding more detail to different parts of the expression will actually change the impression. And then when drawing in perspective, the lines that indicate your shape on curves will bend or straighten more to imply the shape. So what's meant by this instruction here, so if you imagine these are straight profiles of the eyes here, as you start adding more perspective on a higher or lower angle, you're gonna have to change the style of these eyes and really the bends as you start adding more perspective. Because you're essentially adding more distortion to the straight lines, they're going to become further and further away from straight lines in order to still indicate that perspective. So as you can see with this high angle low here, if you're looking down on the character, you would see that a lot more of the top eyelid part of the eye, and you would see a lot less of the top end of the pupil, as you can see here, versus the lower end where you'd actually see a little bit more on the bottom part, and the top part of the eye is actually shown a little bit more on the top. So that's what it's really meant by this sort of eye shape. I feel like that's going to be something a little bit more experience-based and really understanding and drawing in perspective, but I digress. And then for hair, there's mainly 3 shapes with hair, which Chyan mentions he's going to be going over hair in a separate lecture anyways, but just the real basics, it's got 3 shapes, which are going to include the front, the side, and the back. The front covers the bangs, the side covers the sideburns to the ear, and the back covers pretty much anything behind the back of the ear to the back of the head. And different hairstyles can kind of change where those lines will part and what they dictate. But like I said, Chyan's going over hair in another lecture, so this isn't really important to stress and learn right now. And then in order to maintain impression, add detail where needed. So for more acute impression, add less detail, and for a more mature impression, add more detail. And then I listed the visual guide that I drew during lecture, in case that'll help you as well for understanding a little bit more about the theory expressed in this lecture. So as a quick summary, practice the cuboid head shape and know the subtleties that imply its shape in detail. So really understanding where you draw different angles. So really understanding how different lines would change depending on the angle and perspective. How would this line straighten out depending on how this character rotates around in perspective? In different lines as well. Really how this cuboid implies the head, but especially the contours of the face and the expression. Make sure to change the accentuation of the shapes in order to better fit the perspective of the shape. So like I said, that's going to be a lot of this line work and making sure that you're not strict with your shapes and your lines in order to better express the perspective that you have. And then consider stylistic change or decisions to better fit the character to its desired impression. Again, add less detail or more simple stylistic choices if you want a cuter or a younger character, in the inverse for a more mature or older character. And the self-assigned homework is to create a spread around 5 to 6 cuboids of various types of character heads at different angles. That's going to be a lot of these, but better refined and with more details in order to start seeing a little bit more about building characters from the ground up in perspective that are aesthetically pleasing. So in terms of notes, that's the end of today's lecture review. It's important to note that we're finally applying a lot more of these stylistic choices and seeing how these stylistic choices actually affect the impression of the character that we draw in association with everything that we did in the last class. So it's important to note that with just these classes alone, we can build a full character body and face with expression and perspective, which is huge progress for 2 classes. So hopefully you guys are keeping up on your personal work, and hopefully these class reviews have been of help to you in order to keep on top of that class work in order to be drawing more aesthetically pleasing and commercial focused characters. Again, we're going to be getting closer and closer to building our characters into more aesthetically pleasing situations where they've actually got clothes, props, etc., etc. And Chyan's going to be going over this and more and further reviews coming up, so stay tuned, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next lecture. As always, you can stay on top of updates for my videos, possible other content, etc., etc. on my socials, which I'll link here. If you guys have any questions regarding this class or other classes, feel free to let me know down in the comments of any of my videos or on my socials as well. I'll do my best to try and answer them for you guys where I can. As always, I hope to see you guys in the next class, and I hope you guys have a good day. Take it easy.